All right, on this episode of the BIC podcast, we're going to start off with an extended therapy session following last week's live stream where some people caught on it. I'll give a little state of the channel in terms of the editorial side of things, make sure I cover that. And then we'll enter into a little bit of lighthearted fare as we enter towards the Thanksgiving, the giving time of the season, as we head into the holiday season, spiraling towards it with reckless abandon under the auspices and watchful eye of Brett Favre. That and more on this episode of the BIC podcast. Nicely done.
Real quick, so you mentioned we're going to have a therapy session. Is that with Eric's therapist or that other guy?
Eric's therapist ran away and lit themselves on fire.
All right. I'm glad to see you finally made it off the interstate, Eric. Last week, we were concerned. We knew you were very lost. We put up all the wanted posters, milk cartons, all of the other stuff. And we see that you made it back. So.
Yeah, I was... I missed you guys. I would have loved to have been on the show, but I know we talked briefly before the show started, and it wasn't really conducive to entertaining content when I was driving down Interstate 90 Mass Pike in pitch black, coming home from Canada. So we decided that really wasn't going to work out for us. So I'm glad you guys were able to do it. And from what Carlos has been telling me, there are people out there that watch our content that were probably quite pleased I wasn't there. And
we got to figure out some feedback to that effect. Yes.
Yeah. Which, I don't blame anybody. I personally wish I wasn't here. Never mind them. So, yeah.
Well, you're not allowed to leave that room, so we might as well use some use out of you.
Yeah. But yeah,
it is a nice room.
I was back from Canada last week, so I had an 8-hour car drive.
There you go. Now, also coming back, not from Canada, but also coming back from Toronto/Mississauga back to their home place is the AMG Collectibles folks. I want to quickly mention thank you to AMG Collectibles for supporting the channel and the podcast. And I also want to say, I always talk about amgcollectibles.ca and the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel. This week, the AMG Collectibles podcast will be off. The team is recovering from the trip to the Toronto Expo. They're going to take some time to get right, and then we'll be back on a regular schedule next week. So I just want to make that little programming note ahead of time so that everybody knows this week the podcast will not be on. The team is a little under the weather, and they're getting themselves better, and then we'll be able to come back on the normal schedule. But otherwise, check out the website if you want to know a little bit more about what's going on, or check out the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel and check out some of the previous episodes. We've done some podcast episodes already there, and some videos will be forthcoming in the future. So I want to make sure we cover that, and best wishes on them and speedy recovery. And thank you for AMG Collectibles for supporting the channel and the podcast. So we're going to do a little format change from the normal. Usually we'll talk a little bit about NFL where Brandon will brag about his team actually being decent. The Packers did win this week, which I don't know, it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. I was like, I'm glad they played better, but this doesn't actually help me. I don't see a playoff run. So I'm like, in some ways, it's like this actually worked against my interest a little bit. But we'll talk about that here at the end. But there's a couple of things I want to touch off the top. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the folks that gave some great feedback on the live stream this past Friday. And also I've noticed an uptick in views on that live stream as well as some new subscribers. So thanks for folks that came by. I know Sports Card Radio shouted out a couple of times. I do appreciate that. I did send them a little thank you. They credited the podcast and the content, so that's always good. But one other thing I want to quickly say about it off the top is I want to say a little editorial thing. It is not my normal standard. I'm not trying to operate as a watchdog channel. That's not my deal. However, if there is something that I think is worthy, timely, and newsworthy, which that I think that whole sports card therapist situation was, it was definitely worth talking about. And I thought it could result in a great discussion. And we were able to document and chronicle some of the things before they disappeared off the internet. So it was probably good timing that we were able to showcase some of that. I will actually share another thing with you folks today from the podcast, which is slowly being scrubbed from the internet. So a lot of the main feeds have been removed, but I was able to download some of the episodes, including some of the ones I highlighted. And I actually do have a clip that I'll be sharing with you in a couple of moments. But one other thing I wanted to say quickly from that is just don't expect that. I want to make sure I set the expectation properly. If something similar happens in the future, though, that I think is definitely that is worthy of a discussion, or that I know who we're talking about and I have a little background and can offer something, we can bring something to the table as a discussion, I'm always open to doing it. No problem. Happy to do it. Just don't expect that to be the normal programming because I don't go out of my way to seek it out. In this case, it fell into my lap on Instagram. Saw it. I was able to go down the rabbit hole a bit. We found some stuff that was hopefully helpful. Anybody that wants to take it from here and go on with it, hey, have at it. That's awesome. And we're happy that we're able to help in some way, or at least get the discussion started. And it's open to continue at whatever venue you want to continue it. Just want to get that off the top. So I want to share a couple of things and then get you guys' takes on it. I think, and we were chatting before we hit record on this one, part of the reason I think this one stood out, and I think our friend Andy, sports card investigator, actually did a video earlier tonight that took off, and he made the correct point. If somebody was a jag, just a guy, this doesn't get any traction. Because if it's just a regular individual and it's a shill bidding situation or an alleged shill bidding situation or whatever you want, yeah, maybe it's notable to a small group of people. Word gets around a little bit. You share a little bit. Hey, don't deal with this guy. Block this eBay bidder. You know, they're not acting in an appropriate way. That's about the extent of it. That's the end. But if you have a profile in the hobby at all, deserved, undeserved, that's not my place to dictate. But if you have any kind of a profile and you've been on the record saying things or standing on a moral high ground, that's where people look at you, and that's where hubris kicks in. If any of you are familiar with hubris, that's a situation where in Greek tragedy, it's your self-confidence, excessive self-confidence that then kind of dictates your downfall because you put yourself up on a pedestal, and that's where people are happy to see you get knocked down because you kind of created the scenario. Again, hubris. So I'm actually going to play a clip for the guys, and then I want to get their takes on it. So I'm going to play it for you, and I will include a link to this. It is an unlisted video on the channel, but I'll include a link to this one and make it available to folks if they want to listen to it in entirety themselves. This is actually an excerpt from the aforementioned formerly existing Sports Card Therapist podcast. And this is episode number 214, a specific clip about it. So I'm going to play it for you guys, and then we'll take a closer look at it here. To the magic of editing, I even added a lovely little graphics so that we can remember it. Remember the better times when the logo existed. Yes, was still on the internet. So I'm going to hit play for you. I have sped it up slightly, just 1.25, but you're going to listen to it. So specifically, this episode is episode 214, previously existing podcast, and the title was Bad Actors or Lapse in Judgment, ? With Adam Gray, the Real 27 guy. And this clip, and a couple of clips I put together here, is pertaining to the Shayway Vlogs controversy. If any of you remember, when Shayway Vlogs was shilling on his own cards. So this is related to shilling, but a different situation. But just listen to what is being said, which is ironic in context of what ended up happening here.
And you know what? I think that's a really good just life lesson, even outside of the hobby, right? Like if you get caught in something, own it, show humility, try to be sincere and truly feel it. And don't worry about saving face, right? Don't worry about saving face, because I think sometimes people want to have it both ways. They want to apologize, be humble, but at the same time, also kind of save face and throw in a justification for it. And it's like, you really can't have it both ways in most cases, and in this case in general. And I love what you're saying, and because I've said it so many times on my podcast, and not even really talking about hobby stuff or the fraud stuff, but I've always talked about how I believe in second chances, third chances, fourth chances. And I'm not saying I'm going to continually give people like opportunities to screw me over or to screw others over. But what I'm saying is I think it's human nature that we do make mistakes. However, I think it's safe to say that it probably wasn't his first time. It probably wasn't the second time. It's probably been a pattern of behaviors. And I think that's stuff that needs to be acknowledged.
But Rob, let me ask you.
I'm just going to pause for a second. Do you see the irony in that entire sequence of about 1 minute? And this was maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago on his podcast, talking about a different situation. But then I want you to think of the current situation. I'm going to play a little bit more. I've got another 3 minutes. This is a separate piece of the clip, so I've got it broken up into a couple of pieces. But this is the first part where Rob, the sports card therapist, is talking all by himself, specifically about that. In context of where we ended up, how interesting that that's the tact he ended up taking in comparison to what ended up happening. So that's the first piece. I'm going to now hit play again, and I'm going to play a little bit more. Now Adam is going to chime in here, and then Rob is going to keep talking.
Because that's not popular. Again, I'm at risk in saying that of people like thinking that I'm like part of it or something. I don't know why. Because again, like I've been very clear, right? Do you think I've been clear? Like, how do you
100%.
feel? How do you think about what I said?
Well, I don't think that you condone any of this, and I certainly don't as well. And just because we believe in forgiveness and treating everyone, with respect and dignity, even though they might not have treated the hobby in certain aspects with those same attributes, I still think that we deserve and it's really a selfish thing, right? It's like I don't vilify him because I feel bad for him. like I don't vilify him because I don't want to be the person that starts vilifying people. Like I don't like what that does to me. I don't want to drink that poison, that internal poison, you know. But what I would say, and I think a little bit of pushback I would have on what you said is, so I interviewed Rick Probstein on my show probably like 18 months ago, and the subject of Mastro came up. You know, Mastro was involved in just a lot of fraud in the hobby, trimming, all this stuff. I think he even went to prison for a little while. And you know, Rick Probstein, who is I think still friends with Mastro to this day, was like, guys, listen, Mastro, we need to stop like vilifying guys like Mastro. Like he didn't kill anyone, you know, he did not kill anyone, you know, and I can remember it clear as day that my response to him was, well, you're right, he didn't kill anyone. However, when we're looking at this through a hobby lens, we need to look at what is equivalent to capital punishment, like in this hobby. So in this hobby, what are the biggest offenses that you can do to others, right? And really up there and I think a lot of our minds are, aside from like robbery and stealing cards out of someone's showcase or you know, burglarizing someone's house for their cards. You know, if we're talking white collar type stuff, I think, you know, card trimming and shilling is right up there at the top.
Right.
So even though I don't want to cancel anyone, I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe that everyone deserves chances, right? I'm not saying I would ever do a deal with someone like Shay, you know, because of this. You know, I don't know if I would have him on my show and, you know, kind of present in arms with him because of that.
I'll bet you'd think twice, 3, 4 times before doing a deal with him. But would you do a deal with him?
You know, I would have to know the particulars. I don't think I would, though. You know, I really don't. I think because even though I don't want to cancel people out and I don't want to vilify people, I also don't want to stand next to them if they're doing things that I definitely don't believe in.
How interesting. Again, in context. So I didn't play the whole thing. The entire podcast episode is a different kettle of fish, but I think those particular pair of snippets, there are 2 separate snippets that I put together in that compilation there, but they were from the exact same episode, talking about the exact same thing. Now, in lieu and context of what actually ended up happening less than 2 months later, Eric, that's poetry. That's beautiful symmetry in terms of where we ended up here.
Yeah, he definitely set himself up back then. You know, I'm sure it could happen to all of us that if we everything we've ever said or done has been recorded and we screwed up and went back, and I'm sure you could find similar things with all of us. But you know, he has a podcast and it's out there for the world to hear, and the internet is forever, they say. So yeah, it's not a good look when he talks about, you know, the shilling being the worst part, and I'm still, you know, I know I'm hesitating and stumbling a little bit because, you know, we talked a little bit before the show started, and I'm really trying to take all this in after a few days and find out exactly how I feel about it. You know, I don't think this is a guy that should be, quote, canceled. I think he's digging himself a hole by kind of erasing his entire history on the internet, with Instagram accounts and YouTube and all that. I mean, you really
So real quick, I just want to add to what you're saying though. We kind of discussed when we were talking about it, like in a lot of cases, in a lot of instances, and I've heard this in other videos talking about this. In this case, the cover up is worse than the crime.
Yeah,
The crime is still an issue. We all
Right.
agree it's an issue. And on the Friday, part of the reason I like doing stuff like this instead of a standalone video, because I could have done a standalone video. I've got enough clips and other things that I can play for you where I'd be able to do and play these clips out and then talk through the pieces. But on the Friday discussion, we were able to integrate the chat. The chat was able to chime in their thoughts, and we were able to react to them and kind of go back and forth on the discussion a little bit. But the key piece to this is, as bad as it was, which everybody agrees is bad, everybody agrees. Well, maybe some people don't, but most people agree that it's bad.
He has
One
his,
thing that was that?
he has his supporters. He has a fan base. He has friends that are coming out, you know, in his corner, and that's
Yeah.
you know, that's good for him personally that he has people in his life. But a friend's job isn't to ignore when you make mistakes. It's to call you out on them and support you through them.
Right.
So, you know, there's been a few people out there that are saying, you know, he did nothing wrong, and leave the guy alone, and and all that, and glass houses and the whole thing. But just to sum it up, he put this now very quotable mega bid in. You got to stand by that. I understand that
Yeah.
he believed he was the victim of a crime. If you call shilling a crime, which I think I don't know how it couldn't be if someone's manipulating you to pay more than you would. I think that's thievery. So he believed he was a victim of a crime, and his way of defending himself was not paying. Well, you were foolish enough to put what I would estimate as a complete guess a $2,000 bid on a card that is nowhere near that value. Somebody else, it seems, probably did their own mega bid, thinking they're going to put up a huge number, and that nobody is going to beat, so they could secure the card. And you two just sent this thing skyrocketing. You can't claim victim if the other person did exactly what you did.
But also, key point, honored their side of the bid.
Yeah.
The underbidder, maybe it was too high, but that's not my concern. That's not my case to
Right.
figure out. The underbidder, who was no longer bound to
Yeah.
honor the bid, he could have been like, all right, put it back up and we'll see what happens with this person out of the picture and let's go. But this person said in this instance, and it was, I believe, Modest Card Collector, and I referred to them in the Friday Live and covered the screenshots and everything with the Instagram stories. And again, credit to them for doing digging to find out, what was going on there. They wanted to know for themselves and figure out what was going on. So credit to them for that. But the key piece to this puzzle is, in the end, while they may not have wanted to pay that much necessarily as a result of what happened there, they still honored their bid.
Oh yeah.
Which is the key point here. And that is where, sports card therapists erred. And regardless of what you believed, that's not the point. The point is, you put in this number, you should never put in a number that you were not willing to honor. What if in this case, clearly at least one other person was willing to go there? So therefore, reverse situation. What if you did in fact know there was one other guy who was hell bent on getting there and was willing to go up to that level, and now you're here? You've won the auction. Were you prepared to pay the full amount, like the amount in total? Because the whole we talked about the long drawn out apology that kind of went around in circles and circles and circles. But the truth is, it's not an excuse. And that's the reason I played that clip off the top, the one that we just talked about, the podcast one. He was talking about somebody else's. But what was the discussion? Well, I don't know if I could have this person on platform. I don't know if I could do business with them, whatever. Well, you just did something that is a faux pas in the hobby on a similar level. And then you also tried semantics. You tried to argue that it wasn't really shill bidding. Well, let me ask a question. And I mentioned this on Friday, but I'm going to repeat it. What is different from an intentional shill bidder, someone who is trying to drive up the price, bidding high, finding out what your maximum is because it would be one increment higher than wherever you went, and then retracting the bid before the end of the auction? It's the same action. It's the same net result. You put in a bid, you effectively found out what the other person's max is, and then you didn't pay. You retracted it. You use the mechanism that eBay has on there. I punched in the wrong number. eBay will let you do that. Well, effectively, didn't you just do the same thing? You found out what the maximum is, and the other person in the end paid their maximum to the seller.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's responsible for what he typed in, and that's that. You thought you were going to outfox, the system, right? And it came back and bit you. Sorry, you're still accountable. You have to pay that. You can't say, "Oh, wait a minute, not fair, not fair." You guys, kind of caught me off. You kind of caught my trick here. Sorry, you have to pay.
Right. Now, Brandon, I want to get a couple thoughts from you on this.
Is worse. The 9 minute apology in the car, just repeating over and over again. And in the video you just showed, he specifically talked about not giving excuses and taking ownership and not give. I mean, that's what it's 9 minutes of just giving the excuse.
It's the exact opposite of what he did. That's why that clip is particularly pertinent given where we ended up. So Brandon, I want to ask you a couple of thoughts from you. One of them is obviously the general issue at hand, also the clip in context with the issue at hand. But then we talked about before we started recording that, again, cover up being, exacerbating the issue, making it worse. No matter what, if he had stuck around and was keep doing his podcast and whatever, he's going to get flack, deservedly so. And what I didn't play for you guys is, and maybe I'll play it at another time here. I also have a clip from his last podcast before he kind of disappeared. In his last podcast, he was bragging about how high he was in the rankings of listeners and podcasts, and how much he was doing it at such a higher level than everybody else. So Eric, the hubris, back to hubris. Right. The hubris was off the chart. This guy was riding high. This was literally the last episode before this entire thing came to pass. He was riding high, bragging about how he was producing this high quality podcast content and how other people aren't producing it on the same level. And I'm not exaggerating. I can pull the clip. That is nearly verbatim what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And then immediately after. So I'm not surprised that there are plenty of people who are deriving a great deal of satisfaction from his downfall. But Brandon, here's my question, the delay playing into this though. By getting rid of it, by wiping everything away, there was at least an opportunity if you had come with a more sincere apology and just fallen on your sword, owned it. People are going to snicker, they're going to throw rocks at you, but you can probably power through it. If we use the example of chasing cardboard. If we learn nothing else, even with controversy, if you just, bullheadedly power through it, there's a good chance the hobby will get bored and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, so from what we discussed, previous, I said, because to be clear, I haven't watched the videos and all this other stuff and kept up with it, but we kind of, talked about it and I got a better understanding of it. The scenario is 100% possible. It sounds like he threw a large bid out there, in hopes of winning the car, didn't expect it to go to what he did, and then he backed out of, the analogy I used, he pissed in the pot, but wasn't ready, wasn't ready to own up to it. And then listening to this clip you just played, you can tell the guy is a good talker. He's very good. He's a good talker. And obviously he's a therapist, so, that's probably part of his profession, but he's very also hypocritical. Mm-hmm. He says all of these things, and it's funny because the first thing I noticed before you even hit play, the title of the episode, Bad Actors or a Lapse of Judgment, I believe is what it was.
That's what it was, yeah.
It was this, I don't know the guy. I have never talked to him, nothing like that. But it feels like this was a lapse of judgment. But now he's went into the bad actor segment of it.
Yeah.
Because if he did an apology video and if it was sincere, then let it be. Stick to what you felt you did right and wrong. That you weren't maliciously intending on harming anyone. The circumstances played out. You thought you were being taken advantage of. Turns out you weren't. Mm-hmm. But own up, hey, okay, I screwed up and I didn't pay for it. I should have. That's the only place he went wrong. But, explain that, leave it be, and then continue on about your business. And hell, the negative comments and the uptick in viewers to go on and troll him or whatever else would probably only help his listeners and his podcasts and his videos and everything else anyway, because the algorithm's going to love it.
Yeah.
And just, I mentioned the Pokemon thing with Don Diego. That was live on camera. Mm-hmm. She admitted to her friend that she bid his card up and accidentally won it.
She's still around. She's still around.
Exactly. There's the PWCC thing getting completely kicked off of eBay, and whether mm-hmm. folks want to say eBay was in the wrong or whatever, mm-hmm. let's be real. We know shilling has, and I'll use air quotes, allegedly happened. But this dude sits here and mentions Rick Probstein, that he had Rick Probstein on.
I knew Eric
is
would
the-
enjoy that. I had to play that clip for Eric, included that second piece, because I knew Eric would appreciate the Rick Probstein call out.
But
Hey,
he
he was shaking
mentions
his finger going,
him.
"You can't do that, Rick. No, no, no."
He mentions him and Maestro, and then, well, what is one of the first things anybody thinks of when they hear Probstein, right?
Mhm.
Voila.
Yeah.
But then is going to say that he would never have this other guy on his podcast, which I don't know much about that scenario, which is completely hypocritical because you just said you had Rick freaking Probstein on. Like, dude, like, you're not making sense here. So I don't know that he intentionally ran this card up. I think he threw a bid out there, thought it would stick, and it was enough to win the card. He wanted the card. He probably thought it was going to be much cheaper. Another guy must really like Eli Manning, felt the card was worth value, worth whatever, and threw a bid on himself. And then, scenarios played out. And because he has an audience, you mentioned if he was just a guy, it wouldn't be a big deal. Right.
It wouldn't.
Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
he would have
go-
gotten blocked from eBay, and some people would have blocked him, and that would have been about the end of it, probably.
Go check like DC Sports 87, who's running cards all the time, every day. Go look at how many cards they relist because they're unpaid bids.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
all the time. Like, and
Sometimes
I'm
you have
not
people
saying
that
it's
will.
right.
You have people who will make videos where they'll share screenshots of bidders on eBay who will brazenly tell the seller they're not going to pay. Like they will mock them and they can share a screenshot. So they'll go as far as, I don't care if the consequences are so small on eBay as a seller as a buyer,
Yep.
that you, the seller, I can taunt you through the messaging system of eBay, literally admit to you, I have no intention of paying whatsoever. And there's minimum consequences for me as a buyer. So eBay's platform, we focused on that on Friday. eBay as a platform has done a terrible job, but do they have real incentive to curtail it when at the end of the day, they don't care? Shill bidding, if somebody in the end actually pays and the shill bidding was successful and it pushed the price up, it increased the fees because they got a percentage of that sale. So even if it works once in a blue moon, they actually make more money from that. They'll make additional fees and additional charges as part of this. So everybody has a hand in this. I think the key, though, is that I understand why, given the platform that he was granted, and it was granted, it was given. You can say earned, we can talk about that, but sometimes we know that what hits in the algorithm, what doesn't hit in the algorithm, some of it's timing, some of it's luck, some of it is getting the right shout outs in the right situation. All that is part of the equation. So sometimes, you might have done some good work and people respect that and appreciate it and therefore pass it along. But sometimes you're in the right place in the right time. You got lucky. And just accept that. That's okay. But then when you have that platform, then it becomes, and we've talked about that with the chasing cardboard thing. We've talked about that with when Mike Baseball Collector came on and talked about that whole situation on the live stream. When you are at a higher profile and you're seen it, you're put up on a pedestal, you're under the microscope. It becomes even more important that you go out of your way to try to avoid even the look of impropriety. But if something happens, then you have to accept it. You have to own up to it. Like I said, honestly, what would have likely happened if he had stuck around and just, grit his teeth and had to bear it, he would have had to deal with the backlash. He would have gotten some. Eventually, people would have gotten a little bored with it. There's some people that would never let it go. It would always remind you at every turn. And obviously, given the clip that I just shared with you, listen, that's only one clip. I only downloaded 3 episodes. I started going through them and I found clips, plural, that are very interesting or very entertaining in context of what ended up happening, where he said something that almost immediately would come back to bite him in the ass. Well, I can guarantee you there'd be reaction videos of people pulling these clips themselves and compiling them into like, look at what this guy said and look at what ended up happening. And ha ha ha, we're all going to laugh. But you're just going to have to eat it. That's part of the equation. You put all this content out there, you said it. Eric was right. We can have things taken out of context, but that was not taken out of context. I gave you the context. I gave you the episode number and I told you what the episode was about. I didn't add or put words in his mouth. He said those things, gave those examples, and went there.
And as a therapist, we're going to throw that in there. As a therapist, if he indeed was true to his statement and reasoning of what happened, and gave a sincere apology, then he could have used his mistake to potentially help others.
Sure.
You know, use himself as the example. Put it out there. I screwed up. I did wrong. You know, let's not do this. Try to help the hobby in a sense by using his own mistake as an example. And he could have done that because, again, I haven't followed along all of the details. I don't know this guy very much, you know, other than what we talked about, the situation and everything.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if it wasn't just a dumb mistake of throwing that bid out there and you know, oh crap. Well, I didn't want to pay that much, so I'm just not going to pay it and whatever, you know. And it's not right. I'm not saying any of this was right.
Mhm.
But I don't know if that mega bid, as it's coined, was
It's a really
expected to
stupid
be.
term, though. I hate it. It's stupid.
I don't think it expected to be where it was, and when it happened, he had this oh shit moment and chose the wrong way to handle the situation, and then made it worse by removing himself and all of that, because that just compounds the guilt. That basically says it takes all credibility away when you run from the issue instead of just owning up. And he said it in his own clip. So he's a hypocrite at this point.
Exactly. Well, that was part of the reason why I thought, like I said, out of all the clips that I pulled from, again, only 3 episodes. I didn't go through the library. Like, who knows? Like, I have no idea. Literally from 3 episodes, I was able to find a lot of little gems, and that was from just one. That was one specific episode, and I gave you the context of it, just so that you at least understood what they were talking about, what that was specifically broached that topic. But one of the pieces there that I thought was like salient, given everything, that the action of wiping yourself from all these different social medias makes you feel. He in that clip, he said, well, it makes you, I'm paraphrasing, but it makes you wonder if that's the only time or if there's been other times that this has been. And in context of where we you know, in retrospect of where we're, those words basically can be thrown back in your face, like just
Yeah.
listening to the very words coming out of your mouth.
What Brandon said, because I agree with this point, is that I also don't think that, to use Rob's own words, I don't think he's a bad actor. I think it was a lapse in judgment. But everything that's happened since has made it so much worse, has made it a story, has made you question everything about the guy. And I'll say the same thing now that I said when we were dealing, you know, with that issue with the Dwayne Johnson, the Rock auto. If you just left it alone, said you were sorry, and powered through, it would have been done in a week, maybe 2, because of these videos that he has that people would have kind of brought up like you did. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it would have been over. And they would have been on to the next thing. No one's talking about that Dwayne Johnson auto card anymore.
There's the odd meme here and there, but for the most part, it's died down.
Right. You know, I mean, yeah, there's always going to be a couple that want to continue to drag things out. But
listen, I'm still going to keep "We Got Duped" agreed because it is one of the great memes of this hobby.
Well, that was a huge.
That was a good one.
That was a unique circumstantial.
It's G.I. Joe. It could have been anything else. Eric, I will never let it die.
No, that was huge. I mean, that was millions of dollars in fraud. So
absolutely,
I mean,
yes, absolutely.
That's you know.
Here's a question for you two, because this could have went both ways, and I'm curious on the take. So we're sitting here talking. You know, it would have faded out. The hobby has a short attention span, and something else would have happened that would have been, you know, shinier, and they would have ran for it like a squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
But the holidays were coming up. Do you think the holidays could have been a reason he didn't want to deal with it through the holidays? So he's like, all right, I'm just going to remove myself from the situation. I don't want to deal with it. Or should he have just, again, like we were saying, just keep it there? Because people would have had the holidays to distract them a little bit. And it would have even possibly smoothed it over even quicker, you know?
Power
So
through.
do you think maybe after the holidays he peeks his head back into the content
Oh,
space, or do
you
you
stole
think
my
he's
question.
white?
You stole my question. So you took the holiday angles a little different. My question was just going to be just open ended. Is this the last we see? Is there future therapy in our future from the sports car therapist? Does he seek the redemption arc? That was going to be like my question. Just in general, it doesn't have to be just after the holidays, but I'm just obviously given the way that the hobby does have a short memory, we tend to forget some of the things. Other stuff comes up. So maybe Eric, maybe I'll start with you. I want to. Brandon beat me to the punch, but it's a good question. Do we hear from the therapist again?
I hope so, because I don't think he's a bad actor. I think it's a lapse of judgment. I don't like cancel culture. You make your bed, you got to lie in it. So it's like after a reasonable amount of time of you know getting pointed at and laughed at, you move on. So I hope we see him again.
Does it count
Uh,
though? If it does it count though as canceled? Because in this case, he canceled himself.
well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Is if he just powered through, it'd be so much less of an issue. I don't. I hope he comes back, but I don't know if he will, because you've wiped everything out. You have erased and canceled yourself. It's like he got mad at us, the hobby, and said, "I'm taking my ball and going home. You don't deserve me."
He was
And
a
he's wiped
hypocrite of what he
everything out,
said in that clip.
and he's gone home
Yeah.
and said, "Screw you. I put all this time and effort and podcasting and cards and money and all my professionalism and my advice in this hobby and experience, and I've given it all to you, and this is how you treat me. I'm taking my ball and going home." So that's now, if he does come back, he's got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And what's really, if you had to choose to look someone in the face and get feedback from them, would it be the whole take my ball and go home, or I screwed up working on eBay? I could handle you made a mistake on eBay feedback a lot better than you kind of being a wuss and you took your ball and went home like a big baby.
I'm inclined to agree with there. Like I said, the action since made it more and gave it more legs than it would otherwise have had if he had taken his medicine. The analogy I would say is take your medicine.
Yeah.
You're not going to like it. It's not going to feel good.
No,
And like I said, the memes were merciless in the first couple of days, but guess what? The memes aren't going to go away. You're going to be a hobby punchline for a while. Those in reality, I kind of in the same realm of we got duped, agreed. Steve Hart still exists. He's still out there. He became a meme. Logan Paul is United States champion in the WWE. These guys don't go away. they hang around and do other things and whatever, but they got to be willing to take some shots along the ways for that to happen. Here's
Well,
another
there's a good.
actually go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick. That's a huge look at the scale of what happened with that whole scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, that was $1 million transaction,
Yeah.
$1 million+ transaction. That you had Steve Hart, Logan Paul, Pokemon, but then you had Mealy Pops and what is the other dude, Card Kahuna.
Yeah, that's right.
Mealy is
I think you had
still
Shine
doing his
involved in
thing.
some of that too, right? You had Shine involved in some of that too.
Well,
if memory serves me.
Shine was the original purchaser.
No, I understand, but
who
he was
is-
part of
yeah,
the overall
yeah,
conversation and the whole
right.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that basically got taken advantage of on the bad box and then transferred it off to Logan. But, all of the guys, to my knowledge, outside of maybe Card Kahuna, which sounds like he took the money and ran and went partying, they're still operating. They're still doing their thing, right? I think the point to this whole conversation we've had is yes, again, I'm going to say it. He was very hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
B, instead of erasing all of the content, he should have just, if he was truly sincere with the apology. And people aren't great at YouTube apologies. It's all over everywhere. People suck at YouTube apologies. So screw that part of it. But do the apology. And if he was sincere and truly believed in what he said, then just go radio silent. Don't do anything. Just kept the content, kept the Instagram, whatever. Let people post whatever the hell they want. Let them get it out of their system. And then maybe do an interview with somebody. Take some questions, answer some questions or whatever to move back in and start doing your content again. Chasing Cardboard did the same thing. Now they erased the video, but for the most part, they weren't putting out a lot of videos. They weren't making a lot of Instagram posts. They weren't flooding the gates. They were kind of riding the wave and then eased back in to normal, regularly scheduled programming.
Yep.
And I think if he would have just done that, done the apology, said, even said, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of time and then let people get their keyboard warriors out, until their fingers got arthritis and then started doing their thing again, he would have been fine. But this was the wrong way to handle it.
A week, maybe 2. That's it.
Oh, if you recall, though, what's funny is in the end, it still happened. But if you remember when Mike Baseball Collector came on the live stream and we were talking about the Chasing Cardboard thing, literally, and I can go find that clip, it's there. Literally, I said to him, if nothing else happens, if nobody says anything silly, it'll be gone in a week or maybe 2. It's the same kind of timeline, And again, it was a thing. There were a lot of videos, a lot of reactions, a lot of it too. I might have made a few, but the point is, there was a lot of those things. But even still, to this day, if you go to Chasing Cardboard, they've got new episodes. I'm not watching them because to me that was like, nah, I'm good. But other people do. Other people still watch them and they enjoy it for what it is, and they're still churning their content out there. And I don't know if it's better or worse than it was before, but it's still there. Either way, it's still there, and he's still chugging along. Let me ask one more question though, to kind of put a button on this. So, believe it or not, folks, from listening to podcasts, this is where 5% more mature content gets you. I think this was a very good discussion. I think it was a very solid conversation, and we got to have a lot of different takes and a lot of elements to it. But let me pose this question to you both then. I'm in the same camp of Eric in the sense that I think, well, I should say, he says he hopes. I think he will. I think at some point he'll be convinced to come back. I think his friends will circle the wagons. They've already been doing that. I think they'll circle the wagons. At some point he'll be convinced to come back. But here is my question. Follow up. In lieu of what ended up happening, in lieu of shutting himself down and doing all that, he had a few sponsors and things that he had been doing in the past. He had been doing stuff with PWCC, and I don't know if he's had too many other ones, but he's had some in the past. It's kind of a twofold question. One is, do these companies, the answer is kind of yes, but if you want to expand on it, go for it. Do these companies really need to start doing a better job, really carefully vetting who they decide to get in bed with? Like making sure that whatever content they're doing, because as I said, when I played that clip, that's something that can get thrown back in your face if you ever fall on the wrong side of the tracks. Stuff like that. And the more of that kind of stuff you say, the more people can throw back in your face because you actually did say it. We don't have to guess. You did say it. Is this a situation that we've had a couple of these now? Does this put a little bit of a cool? The market's already down. Does this put a little bit of a cooling on some of the sponsored content?
Go
ahead.
Go ahead, Eric. I'll let you go first.
No. We're a small niche. It isn't like Coca-Cola is using the hobby and hobby influencers in these shows to get this.
I still have a dream, Eric.
I know. We're a very small niche, and even the biggest companies in that small niche need to advertise, and the only place they can advertise is through platforms like this. So they're going to go to the people with the biggest numbers who produce the most content and offer them probably very, very little. I don't think anyone's getting paid $100,000 to represent PWCC on their YouTube channel. But even if it's only $100, you know, someone's oh sure, absolutely, and now look at we're you know, a sponsored show, and that's a big deal. So they're going to continue doing that. I think they do some due diligence. You know, there's definitely, and I'm not naming any names, but there are definitely content creators out there that nobody is going to want to do business with.
Sure.
Their content is poor. They're negative. They are constantly putting their foot in their mouths. You know, they're just, you know, they're a brick shy of a full load. But there's others that are doing a good job, represent themselves well enough, and they just all they're looking for is those subscriber numbers, and they're looking for, you know, average watch per video. And if those numbers are up high enough, they want to have that you know what I think they're called bugs, right? In the industry, when it says like PWCC up in the corner, I think that's called a bug. You know, in the
Look at him
screen,
dropping lingo on us, Brandon. Look at him.
or scroll like we have with our sponsor of you know, AMG Collectibles. You know, that's they want that.
Yeah.
And we're such a small niche that if all of a sudden I say something absolutely deplorable right now, AMG will simply just pull their sponsorship.
Oh, 100%. I think though what's interesting, and I generally agree with your general sentiment. I think that's fair. But the only reason I'm asking and posing the question is that, like I said, part of the reason that Rob kind of started feeling himself and got to that point where he was started kind of bragging about where he stood and compared himself to really the only other bigger one in the space. He was saying, I think in the conversation, like I said, I've got the clip. I could always play it back later if we need
Yeah.
to. But the point is that he was comparing himself to Geoff, everybody's favorite, Jeff Wilson, because again, that's the biggest content creator in terms of followers in the space.
Numbers.
So if you're even close by, you're like a close number 2 and hanging in there, you know, in terms of listenership. And people forget YouTube is one thing. We're doing this on YouTube. That's the main hub. I always try to draw people towards that main hub because it's there. But I do have an audio version of it as well if someone wants to listen to it. You don't get the full experience of it, but it's still either way. You can listen to it or you can watch it. But YouTube is one thing. It's got discovery. It's got that element of it. We can show visuals. We can do those things. But then some people, yeah, they're in the car or whatever, or they're working out and they just want to listen to their podcasts. But if you've got a lot of listenership, that has value too. That's why there are sponsors related to that kind of thing that's separate from anything happening in this format or even on Instagram or that kind of influencing or anything like that. But the only reason I question is that I agree that I think there's still going to be plenty of companies who still want to do it because they need those eyeballs wherever they can get them. But I think though, if you put yourself in the wrong place and your brand is based on being a quote unquote pillar of the hobby, that can hurt the brand enough where you lose those eyeballs and then it's just not interesting anymore. And as a brand, you also don't want to necessarily associate with someone who is in a position to get toppled so easily or so hard. Because if you're kind of treading the middle, it's kind of hard to go wrong. Like, unless you literally go way, way in one direction or another. If you're just kind of treading the middle and you keep it pretty even keel, most sponsors, it's safe. It's considered to be safe content. It's the G-rated content that you don't have to worry about somebody necessarily, unless they just lose it and don't care, and then whatever happens. I'm just curious. Since it is a niche, though, there's less choices in the space, so less sponsors too.
We manufacture ridiculousness. We're not hobby watchdogs. We're not doing it, you know, we're not 2020 or 60 minutes. We manufacture ridiculousness. We don't take ourselves seriously. I actively on Fridays tell people not to watch our show. I, you know, yell and swear at the audience, call them names, and yet people enjoy the ridiculousness. I don't know if, other than our friends at AMG, if anybody else would want to sponsor that ridiculousness, but I like the fact that we don't have that extra added responsibility. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love someone to start sending me a check every Friday, but that comes with more responsibility.
Look, the dream of crumble cookies lives, man. Dream of crumble cookies lives.
I want the cookies, okay, and I will act less ridiculous on Fridays if I can get cookies. I wouldn't have as much fun.
So
I'd have to be like, "Excuse me, Joshua, I would request your silence, please."
Sponsored
know.
by Crumble Cookies.
Yeah, that's not any good. People want to hear me tell Josh to shut up.
Go ahead, Brandon. You were saying?
well, I was just gonna say, so to touch on your question,
Yes, please.
you were, to refresh, you were asking, do you think there's gonna be less sponsorships? And I'm gonna go a little bit deeper on this because it's, and I'm gonna go back to the word hypocritical.
Okay.
The companies in the space are, in many cases, way too relaxed on who they're handing these quote unquote deals out to. There's
Yep.
very little vetting. There's at times very little even knowledge within the company, or the company.
I argue sometimes
knowledge.
they don't even watch the content; they just look at the view counts.
Well,
Exactly.
and vice versa. Sometimes the people being sponsored don't really know the company that they're even being sponsored by. There's
True.
okay,
That's
it's a
fair.
check.
That's
The
fair.
number's good.
Yeah.
And so it goes both ways. But then to go further on that, how many of these companies themselves have had or still may have controversial aspects or things that are shady or shouldn't be happening in this hobby? Unfortunately, as sad and as fun as sports cards can be, it has a very deep, dark side to it of shadiness and BSing. So it's kind of hard to say, well, we're just not going to sponsor anybody anymore if they're not doing shit very legitimate themselves, So do I think it would change? No, because as you mentioned, this is basically the sports card TV. Where else are they going to have commercials of? Unless Fanatics starts throwing them out on, Fox and ABC and CBS and ESPN and everything and tying it in with their, merchandise commercials or whatever. Where are these companies getting advertised? So no, I don't think they will.
No.
I think it'll continue as business and, and sponsorships too are kind of I guess in the YouTube sense, kind of a newer thing. Like there wasn't a ton of people that had sponsorships, not long ago. And then they started, it seemed like you could just go pick one up anywhere.
Yeah, I think
So,
it started during the pandemic when the money was there.
yeah.
I don't recall, it doesn't mean that it wasn't there, but I don't recall watching content that had sponsorship before the pandemic. Now I'm sure that was there or whatever, but I don't recall it. And then the pandemic hit, cards are worth, billions and billions of dollars, worldwide. And all of a sudden, every show's got sponsorships, multiple sponsorships. I mean, there was some during the pandemic that they were like commercial breaks, at points of the shows. So they jumped in with both feet, having to get their brand out to the public. The views are way down now because people are no longer trapped at home, and the money has dried up in a lot of areas, and you don't see as many shows that have um, sponsorship anymore, and you don't see as many sponsorships out there because some of the companies don't even exist anymore. That
I was going to say that's a big piece. That's a big piece of it. And the normal attrition took care of that situation a little bit. And by the way, Eric, I'm going to push back on that concept. I will have you know that the viewing numbers on nonsense are booming. They're strong these days. It's like this, the niche of a subcategory of a niche still holding strong.
And I'm very seriously again. We're 5% more serious here. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of what we've done over the last 3 years. I mean, I think you've done a great job growing this brand, and the numbers are proving that. I think we're getting better all the time. But I also realize that when I came on board 3 years ago or so, there were, there was there were more options for viewers to watch content.
Yeah.
Now, people who still want to watch content, they are much more limited. And I'm
Well,
glad that they still are interested in what nonsense we put together as a team, with us three and Bobby and Brad and Yannick and all the other people that join us periodically and are a part of what we do. But most importantly, the viewers who participate on Friday nights in the chat. I stand by that chat on Fridays is the most important thing. And as long as people keep typing away on Friday nights, I don't see why
Even with loud keyboards? We know
no,
how you feel about loud keyboards.
No, the jerks with loud keyboards need to knock that crap off. But it's really about those constant people, the same names every week who are there with us every Friday. My appreciation for them is very great, because we wouldn't be doing this on Mondays and shown on Tuesdays if it wasn't for what you have built on Fridays. So
Still the flagship.
and so many people that were there 3 years ago on YouTube are gone. Like some of these companies that were sponsoring those shows on YouTube 3 years ago, the companies are gone.
well,
but here we are still.
to, just to step in on that, because he's right. I'm a perfect example. Like, I used to do content pretty regularly. I might not have been every day, and I didn't have like a set schedule, but I don't do hardly any. If I do a video, I think it shocks people now. And the ones I do are my previews and reveals and stuff for the grading submission still. But I stopped doing the content, and in all honesty, it was kind of burnout, but it was burnout because it wasn't fun anymore. It was so much drama driven that it soaked the enjoyment of doing the videos, because it was so, like, the videos are backed. Like, even the popular channels are mostly newsy channels, and it's kind of like cutting the TV on at 5 o'clock. It's not about a lot of the fun and good things of the hobby. It's usually news about, unfortunately, things like we've been talking tonight. But that's what drives the algorithm. That's what people talk about. And just as I said, it's fun and it's exciting. And, we've done this since we were innocent children, sports cards or whatever. There is a dark side to it. And now that we are adults, we are discussing it more, because when we started this as kids, we didn't know that the dark side was happening. We were innocent and ignored that. And now we know all about it. So, that's the unfortunate part to it. And, it is, you have to pick and choose your lanes and find the path that you enjoy.
Nice. Now, before we take off here and go to the next section, like I said, it's the reverse of the normal setup. So those of you who wanted to get our sports card therapy session, we have concluded the sports card therapy session. But as a button on this whole piece, what Eric was basically talking about, how there are less channels, and therefore those that survive are able to then, hopefully, if they're doing if they're doing things that people enjoy, are able to pick up some of that momentum. Means, Eric, it means that this channel has benefited and been buoyed by one of the best words in the English language, Eric. You know what that is? Default. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Simply by existing and surviving, you losers. Default. I win.
You win. Yep. Last survivor.
Yeah. I'm very proud. I'm very proud, Brendan. This is a proud moment. As soon as Eric started explaining that, I was like, that sounds an awful lot like default. I love default. Yep. That's the best way to win. Default.
And I'm curious, like, of these these channels that were prevalent and popular 3 years ago that are no longer in existence, if they all came back tomorrow, would they have the same viewer numbers? Or people be like, nah, you've been gone 3 years. I'm done with that.
I think there
It's
would be
not
some
even
folks that
that.
would enjoy.
Go
ahead.
I was just gonna say it's not even that about them being gone and all of that, but I really think the hobby in general is a lot on a smaller scale. It may not feel like it, but I feel it's decreased a bit.
Yeah, well, I think we got to remember when we measure the hobby, and this could be its own separate discussion. So I won't go too far into that rabbit hole, but I'll quickly touch on it. But it's a very important thing. Whenever somebody talks about this, we have to define, like, what do you consider the hobby to be? To me, the flippers and transient folk are part of this equation too, because guess what? When they come in, they're spending money, so that's part of the equation. If you want to talk about how the market gets impacted, we have to consider that. If you want to talk about how content is consumed, we have to consider that. So one of the things that happened was there were for many years, even going back previously to 2016, contrary to what some people believe, there was content prior to 2016, believe it or not. But even going back in those days, it was a lot of very collector base, and there was zero sponsorships because there was nothing that warranted sponsorships. There's nothing that had enough traction. It was very those collector channels still exist. Some of them did lose interest because, well, it's hard to make videos if no one's watching or listening. The engagement isn't there. You're not really interacting with anybody. Then you're not going to keep doing it indefinitely to, talking to an empty room or talking into a void. It's very difficult. It's very tough. But a lot of those channels that cropped up, especially as the boom kicked in, was because the money was there. All of a sudden, there was a lot of movement. Things were happening fast. If folks who do watch the channel remember back, even a year or two, well, I would say 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there were 2 live streams. The Friday is the flagship, but the flagship started on Sunday. It was a Sunday night live stream that became a Friday night live stream, but there was a stretch of time where there was a Friday and a Sunday night live stream because there was so much going on that we could have a conversation on Friday and have a completely different set of conversations, not necessarily related to what was being talked about on Friday on Sunday, because there was enough to talk about.
And they were 7 hours long.
Yes, they were.
I can't do that anymore. I can't. I just can't.
It was a golden era. A
golden era. And I was going to bed at 3 a.m. and I can't do it anymore.
Eric's an old man. He's lost his ability. But the point is, though, there was enough to talk about to warrant it, because it wasn't just being filled. It's like talk was happening constantly during that time, even during all that. Today, it's scaled back, relatively speaking. There's still stuff to talk about, but I always joke about it at the beginning of some of the live streams. There's some weeks where, like, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. We find something because we're talking about anything and everything, hobby and beyond. But the point is that, it's a hangout at that point. It's a chat. It's a conversation. But with the other one, we could literally fill it with news stories, new happenings. This is going on. This is going on. This is going on. That was different. When that was happening, you had a bunch of those flipper channels. It's not that they don't exist anymore, but the ones that have survived, their version of default in their niche, in their category, are the ones that are showing you things from a certain perspective, a certain angle. The production values, if you watch, have increased because there was a time where you could be a vlog going to card shows, literally just have a camera and be very basic. Now you go look, they're pretty well edited, a bunch of them. There's a little bit going on. They'll throw some sizzle into it, put some tricks into it to make it look a little more interesting, throw giveaways, they've got all manner of gimmicks to try to make it a little more interesting. So the audience that they've retained is still there for them, but there's just not enough room. There's not enough oxygen in the room to take care of all those bodies. So they had to go away. And if they try to come back in today, they would just cannibalize each other because there just isn't enough oxygen in the room to sustain them all now.
Yeah, there isn't. I agree. There isn't enough to discuss that would keep people's attention. Yeah, I know we joke about Clubhouse. Well, you guys make fun of me about Clubhouse, and that's fine.
Deservedly so, yes. Go on.
Deservedly so. There were times 3 years ago where there was no less than 50 people in Clubhouse 24 hours straight. There was never less than 50 people. Today, middle of the afternoon, I I popped in to see if anybody was doing anything. I was driving from point A to point B, and I was like, hey, I wonder if anybody's in Clubhouse. And it was just my buddy Jeff, who actually lives in Massachusetts, and who I just saw the other day at a show at Foxborough Stadium where the Patriots play or pretend to play. And it's a lot's changed. It's me and Jeff in a clubhouse room where there used to be 50 people for 24 hours straight. Because we had like, you have people in different time zones. We had people in Australia in there. We had Eric Myers, who's in South Korea, in there during a different time zone. We have friends that are in England that are in a different time zone. We have East Coast, West Coast, Hawaii. We had people from all over. People that had worked second or third shift and slept during the day and were up at night, all sorts of different things. And there was constantly 50 people in that room talking about the hobby. And today it was me and Jeff. So a lot has changed. And on platforms like this, like YouTube, like podcasts, like Clubhouse, a lot has changed on those card platforms, hobby platforms.
Is that a reflection, though, necessarily of the hobby, or is Clubhouse just more like MySpace, where at one time it was the greatest thing ever, and now like nobody uses it?
Or is it a function of you guys adopting Highlander rules, and now you and Jeff was fight because there can only be one?
Well, next time I see Jeff, him and I have to discuss that.
I got my own, Brandon. I have my own theories. I have concerns. But since you brought it up, so quickly before I shift over, and folks that were enjoying it, hopefully you enjoyed that. Kind of touched on a couple different topics, a couple different categories. Plus, I got to be default. It was great. I enjoyed it so thoroughly. But before I shift over, is there any other class closing thoughts on the sports card therapy session that we just had?
Don't mega bid, and
if you do, honor the bid.
Yeah. If you're going to, you got to be prepared to pay it.
Yes.
And don't ever do I'm taking my ball and going home, because it makes you look worse.
Don't piss in the pot if you're not going to flush.
Amazing. Sensational. Thank you, Bobbles.
We gotta get that coined with Megabid.
I guess so. I guess that's what's going to have to happen.
That is some Southern logic right there. I'll tell you.
There you go. So since Eric brought it up, let's touch on this. Do you want to quickly run down a couple of things related to that card show? What was the card show? What was going on with it? And what was the experience with it? So we'll touch on that. And then we'll close off with a couple of thoughts on NFL thing, just to kind of end off the episode. So like I said, guys, we did this in reverse. We did the big heavy topic off the top. We covered a lot of ground. And then we'll finish off with a couple of lighter topics before we head off into the sunset for another episode. And then we'll be back next week with a normal formatted thing. Unless somebody does something crazy or lights themselves on fire. Who knows? Always possible. Eric, card show. What happened?
Yeah, it was a very unique card show. There is a company here in Massachusetts run by a gentleman by the name of Chris Costa that is called Card Vault. They specifically deal with high-end cards, and they have like boutique shops around the stadiums of the professional sports here in Boston. So they have a boutique shop right by Foxborough Stadium, where the Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, where the Patriots play. And they had a card show there, and this was their first one at that venue. They've done Fenway Park, they've done the TD Garden, and now they're doing Foxborough. And it was really, really cool. The setting was great. You were on one of the premier levels at the stadium, indoors, but you could walk out these glass doors to the best seats in the house and overlook the stadium, and you can walk around the the field if you wanted to get down there and all this stuff. it was really, really cool venue to be at. I have not been to Gillette in several years. The last time I was there was for a concert, and what really uh, took me aback was looking down on the field. You realize that field is the same size as the one at the high school, at your local high school. It's not very big. And on TV, it looks enormous. You got these 300-pound guys in there taking up all this space, and it still looks enormous. And you're trying to figure out how these multi-million-dollar professional football players can't get from that side of the field to that side of the field on every try because it's so small. How in the world can they not do this? But obviously it's a very difficult game. But just looking at a mostly empty stadium, you're like, that field is tiny. What the hell's the problem?
I like that Eric realized that 100 yards is 100 yards.
Yeah.
Because if you golf at all, 100 yards is like a sand wedge. It's like if you go on any golf, like think about a football field. Think of the dimension, 100 yards, right?
Yeah.
100 yards is like a sand wedge. Go grab yourself. It's a wedge shot into the green. Like it's not really that far if you think about it.
Have you ever seen?
How do the kickers not make every single kick from one side of the field to the other? I mean, good Lord, it's tiny.
Have you ever been to an arena league game?
Oh, the
No,
50-yard field.
I think there's 60, but it's on a basketball court. I mean, it's
basically,
like
yeah.
the basketball arena, yeah. And that really puts it in perspective.
Yeah, because it's like they're almost playing like a bouncy version of football. It's actually a lot of fun though. It's high octane. That's the whole point. It's high octane.
I'd actually like to go to one. The show itself was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was very football heavy, understandably. Believe it or not, it was soccer heavy. The New England Revolution also play at Gillette Stadium. Next to zero hockey, even modern. Usually you'll have like one or two people that are hockey dealers that are at shows like this. Nothing, absolutely nothing. In some guy's junk box, I picked up, these, they're in a lot, he said. I thought these were cool autograph cards, so I grabbed these for like, $5 each. But I was also with this gentleman, Jeff, that I was talking about earlier, who is one of the, he's like number one on the set registry at PSA for like vintage basketball sets. He's really into that. He's been on Jeremy's show talking about his, being so high on the set registry and things. He spent no money. I mean, this guy is somebody who's out looking for, high end vintage basketball, and he did not spend one penny except to get in. So there was two of us, one who's looking for vintage hockey, one who's looking for vintage basketball, and neither one of us spent, he spent nothing. I spent like $10.
At a football stadium that was very tiny, according to what you were explaining.
I perceived it to be small. It's, you expect an NFL field in a stadium just to be this massive thing, and it's actually quite small than what you would see on TV and imagine in real life.
It's interesting that a guy that's number one, or whatever, wherever spot he is in a niche, and I say niche because there's like vintage basketball is potentially the most niches of sports for cards, because there was so much breakup in the years of when they did the sets for basketball.
There's a couple of very specifically defined gaps that are very funny because I think you go
Yeah.
from, I want to say you go from 48 to 57, 57 to 61, and then 61, there's another break. They've literally
Yeah.
got these gaps.
And
I
so like
I don't know.
it doesn't shock me when you said that was his thing and that he didn't spend a dime, because I wouldn't. Like, I'm sure he goes to many shows and doesn't find anything he needs if he's searching for cards to upgrade or fill in holes in his registry or whatever. So that doesn't shock me.
Yeah. So I also had the pleasure of for the second weekend in a row being around our good friend Tim McHenry, also known as Timmy Two Hats from Slab Strong, now from BCW. He was there representing BCW and walking around and wheeling and dealing and doing his thing.
And did he throw card holders at you?
No, it didn't. He usually throws things at me, but usually they're not slab strongs. They're like rocks.
No, but you could insist on him throwing top loaders at you or one touches. He has access to these
He
things.
does. I should. And then those would be worth
He
something.
could throw them upside down.
Yep, that's as they
Even
should be.
better. Even better.
I had other friends that were there. Somebody I'd love to have come on the Friday night show at some point and talk about his company is my friend Dan Patel, who does stand up displays and makes these kind of things that you can put on your desk and hold your cards up and stuff. So there's he was there. He had a booth, so we got to see him. So the social aspect was great and the venue was great, but the show was really small. They may have had like 50 tables, and it was very football heavy.
How was the amount of traffic though? In the time you were hanging out there, was it heavy foot traffic, light foot traffic?
There was a good number of people because they also had a lot of autograph guests. So there was a lot of interest in getting autographs from former Patriots players. But I didn't see a lot of cash going back and forth. I saw a lot of people looking and, standing around and looking or asking, are you buying?
What was the entry fee?
$15.
For a 50
Not
table
bad for
show,
the
that seems
stadium.
aggressive.
Well, when you're at this type of venue, that's what you're going to have to pay. If it was
I would
parking.
a VFW hall, you pay $5.
But here's the thing though. I can live with the whole venue, that part I get. But my thought is though, if you're only gonna have a 50 table show, then you're not really maximizing. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting my value as an attendee for a $15 ticket.
It may have been a little bit more, but this wasn't this wasn't a major card show by any means. They didn't have hundreds and hundreds of tables.
Sure.
Did they charge you parking?
No,
Okay.
which was great. Yeah, no, parking was free. You just had to pay an admission. God help you if you wanted to eat something there though, because they had the same vending prices as if there was a game. So you'd bankrupt
hell no.
to get food.
That's
no,
more
What
than
you're saying is
ticket
you need
price.
what you're saying, Eric. What it sounds to me you're saying is you needed meat guy.
Yeah. Well, me, Tim, Michelle, who came but was off through doing some shopping around Patriot Place. There's all these different stores and things around the football stadium now. She went off and did that. My daughter and some of her friends were off doing other things in the area also. While I was hanging out with everybody, but we all met up and had lunch at a restaurant in Patriot Place. So that was fun. It was more of a social thing. It was that part I really enjoyed, but the show really wasn't for me. But if you're if you have money and you are really into football, it was a hell of a good show.
You're talking about like button money?
Well, I don't even have like button money because you've taken it all.
We will have to test that there. Folks
Which
on
is
the
why
YouTube
I was
side.
only able to buy 2 cards like for $10 because I'm poor now because you take it all. How you
And I
got
plan to take more of it.
deposit? How you got direct deposit to my bank account? I'll never know.
I have people on the inside.
Clearly,
Wait. Let's rewind this.
Only one specific thing. Go on.
You're sitting there complaining about money, but you just literally said you spent more to get into the venue than you did on the 2 cards.
yeah, $15 to get in.
I just wanted to clarify and make sure everybody caught that.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is a man who just flippantly throws 10, 15,
He paid
$20.
$15 to enter to buy 2 $5 cards. Let that sink in.
I was
But-
kind of hoping there
but
would have
at
been
least he
more
paid.
there, but there was not.
And he was so rich, he didn't even need Tim to throw supplies at him. He goes, I shall purchase my own supplies at full price, please. Please.
We've had that
Thank you.
conversation before. Remember, he wanted to buy a card and said he was negotiating because he wanted the damn one touch free because he was going to spend
Mhm.
$100 on a card or something.
Mhm.
But yet he doesn't get Tim to just throw the supplies at him, and then he could have just paid the person the extra $5 for the
Yeah,
card.
that was in San Antonio during the plastic crisis during the pandemic, and I had to negotiate a magnetic holder, a mag holder to
See?
put my Ken Dryden Mickey in. Yep,
Mhm.
I pay attention to your stories.
I'm glad
Mhm.
someone does.
There you go. Perfect. So let's transition over. So thank you for the show report. We got a sense of the vibes. So let's transition over. It's like, Mr. Bobbles, is there anything you'd like to say about your team in the footballs?
Well, my team played on Thursday this week, and
Mhm.
we did win because, like last
did.
week, we had the game and lost. I don't know how that happened, but and not that I wish injury upon anyone, but we are 2 weeks in a row of taking out a divisional opponent's quarterback for the entire season. There's only one team left. I don't know if that's a good thing, bad thing, if they should be scared, but I also want to throw out, and this ties into the Ravens
Mm.
and our buddy, Dolphins fan X-Strip, do not talk smack about Joe Flacco.
So Eric, hold
Especially
on.
when you're
I
a
need to give a little
Dolphin fan.
context. I need to give a little background. I'm not going to go too deep on this, but we refer semi-regularly to Discord. We are in a Discord with Sports Card Anonymous and other folk. We will name them only as is appropriate. We want to make sure we keep that. But let's just say there's some content creators, no therapists, thankfully, but other content creators that we know that may be known in the YouTube space who are in there. And we talk a lot of smack, especially during football season. There's a lot of smack talk happening. But one of the gentlemen that he's referring to, who normally I pick on, and this is how great it is. I have a little bit of admin power, so I can put a timeout on somebody. So Eric, see, abuse of power. But I have yet to abuse my power, even though I could. So I like to pick on Extra. It's fun for me. He's a Miami Dolphins fan, and because he's a Miami Dolphins fan, I pick on him, even though there's really no reason for me to. There's no rivalry. It's just fun to pick on him. But he made the mistake. Of somehow picking on Joe Flacco, indirectly making fun of. And then all of a sudden, Bobbles goes over there and flips switch and woke up and chose violence. He just goes after this man. He's like, I'm just sitting there, and me, a guy who likes picking on this dude, is like, whoa. I literally had to pull up the Macho Man meme. That was savage. It was like, whoa. It's like Bobbles wins. He went in straight. It's like he's just hammering away at this. Stop, he's already dead. Oh my God.
I was just proving a point that Joe Flacco has more
Don't mess
Super
with
Bowls
Bobbles. Jeez.
in 15 years since he's been a rookie than the Dolphins do in 51 years. Don't talk about the man.
The man was down, Eric, and he just keeps going. He just goes like, "Oh my God!" He's looking like a pinata, but he was already on the ground. He's just.
Is Joe Flacco still in the league?
Yeah,
He
actually
just got
I think-
re-signed.
Yeah, it's the Browns, right?
yeah.
It's Cleveland, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was able
Yeah.
to get a contract with the Browns.
Oh, good for him. I thought he was a good quarterback for a New York minute.
There was
one
actually,
season.
yeah, there was that, and he had a great playoff run. To lead into that Super Bowl, he played at the highest of levels for. That basically earned him a contract, and then after that
That was
became a
it.
problem. He was never able to justify that contract ever again but for one season and one playoff run, he earned all his money. But at least for a moment in time, he was an elite quarterback. For a moment in time, he was. Not everybody can say that. Not everybody can say that.
I can't.
But clearly, don't pick on him, or else Bobbles will find you. He's gonna get you.
It was just an open invitation as a Dolphins fan. I mean, if you're gonna like make fun of a quarterback or whatever, so be it. But don't pick a Super Bowl winning quarterback when your team is like, y'all are still popping champagne because you had an undefeated season 50 plus years ago. I mean, that's great. But that's the last time you've been relevant.
See, Eric, you're only getting a taste. The man had two memes from the concussion he got. The man, there was. I'm not exaggerating. Like just laying into the body while it's on the ground, kicking it a couple of times.
Bad mouth, Mr. Flacco, under any circumstances. Then
I was gonna say, just leave the man be, or else, like I said, Bobbles woke up and chose violence. And frankly, I was both horrified and tremendously entertained. So, horrified and entertained.
It's all in good fun. No harm, no foul.
Oh, that's not what I'm hearing.
until the next time we hear a little Flacco slant, and all of a sudden Bob's like, "What did you say?"
I'm hearing that there's a man in Florida curled up in the fetal position, sucking his thumb in a dark room right now. But okay,
yeah,
all in fun.
It's all in fun, my friend.
All in fun.
I don't think he ever responded anymore.
He's terrified. He's in witness protection right now. Like he's like I need to hide. It's like the angry Santa Claus man is about to get me. It's like, geez. He's like, you are literally the bad Santa. We'll get you the hat and you're good to go, man. He's like, Jolly Saint Nick? Hell no. There's no jolliness over there. He's only happy when he kills. It's crazy. It's crazy. But yes,
hey, Jenny Ben scored a goal, but we're losing.
Hey, the Renaissance. Well, at least we got something out of it. So quickly, I'll touch on. I'm happy the Packers won. I'm happy they showed improvement. I'm happy Jordan Love had a good game, but it's not helping. I was just sitting there going like, oh no, now they're gonna have hope. And there's no playoff run forthcoming. This doesn't help. Like this doesn't actually. I actually would have loved if he had played well and they had just narrowly lost. That would have been like the best of all worlds, because in reality, it doesn't help the team in any way, shape, or form, really, to win any games this season. This season is not going anywhere. Like that team's not the way as currently constructed. They're not going to advance anywhere. And I'm sitting there like, it does us no good whatsoever to have any kind of a run, even in theory. They're not mathematically eliminated, but it's like, guys, this doesn't help anybody. I assure you, it doesn't help. But I am glad that they showed a little progression. He's had a couple of good games in a row, had a good performance this past game, which was nice. That's really all you're shooting for. We've talked about it in previous weeks. It's like, all you're shooting for is like, I just like to see progression, a little bit here and there, show some flashes of, capability. Some of the players gelling a little bit. So that's good. But it's kind of weird being like, oh, technically, it's not that I'm rooting for losses, but it's like wins don't help me. Being mediocre doesn't really do anything for anybody. It just kind of leaves you.
They played the Chargers, didn't they?
Yeah, the Chargers, yep.
And Bosa, I think I heard Bosa got hurt or something.
I believe that's right. Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yeah.
So so we'll see. Like on to the next. Let's see what happens. But it's one of those things like, okay, let's see what goes down here. We'll have to see how it goes. But again, I continue with the theme of this football season. It's weird. This football season is very strange. I still don't know what to make heads or tails of it.
And stupid.
I've talked about this before. Like I have where we are, online gambling is legal because you can use certain sites and things that are perfectly allowed. It's perfectly fine. They even got geolocation blocks things where it actually has to confirm your location. As long as you're in the correct location, though, you're good to go. But where I am, it's allowed as long as you're using the correct things. And I like to put the odd wager on the NFL, but this season, for the most part, I've looked at it and go, I have some of it. The odds are, if one team is clearly so much better than the other, the odds are garbage anyway. Like it doesn't. There's no point in touching that. Any parlays that I might want to do? Okay, who's going to break this parlay? Who's going to do something crazy and wacky and ruin the thing? And I'm sitting there like, I don't like just throwing money into an incinerator, so I'm not into that. So I'm sitting there like, I feel like my best move is stay away. Like just stay back and like, all right, y'all figure it out. Maybe when we get to the playoffs, we'll have some gauge in what's going on. But right now in the regular season, I have no earthly idea from week to week what we're going to see from any of these teams. So it's kind of where I'm at.
Right now, I was listening to sports radio today, and they were going over how many starting quarterbacks are injured in this league this year.
Yeah.
And it is an outrageous number. It's a very, very high number of starting quarterbacks that have been injured this year. They think it has, these are these sports experts who talk about this stuff every day. They think it's because the defensive lines as a whole in the NFL have become unbelievably athletic and powerful, where the offensive lines have not. So the offensive line play has not kept up with the defensive line play, and they're getting to the quarterbacks or making them hurry, and the quarterbacks are getting hurt. Being a Patriots fan and watching the Patriots games every week, there is no doubt that is the reason the Patriots are doing poorly. That, and there are no wide receivers. There's no one to throw the ball to. And Mac Jones is getting destroyed, and he is completely shell-shocked and psychologically ruined every time the ball is snapped because he thinks he's going to get eaten by a 300-pound monster. But I guess this is the trend throughout the league. So the teams that you guys are watching, I guess you'd have to take a look at that. Have your quarterbacks been injured, and how dominant or has the defensive line been to your offensive line? Are you seeing? Are you seeing your offensive line struggle like here in New England?
I've seen the offense, defense, and special teams struggle at different times during the year. I feel like the scoreboard operators are doing great though. I think the scoreboard operators are having a great season right now. They're my pick for team MVP right now.
The Patriots have great defense. I mean, our defense when everyone's healthy, and is on. I mean, we're a dominant team. Our offense is
what? Did you just say Patriots and dominant team in the same sentence?
Our defense is dominant. Unfortunately, our offense is non-existent. And the defense is on the field for so much, they're exhausted and beaten up by the end of every game. Because they're just out there constantly because it's 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Oh, it's been intercepted. Oh, it's been sacked, stripped, this, fumbled. And defense comes back on. These guys are just getting beaten up this year. They're just on the field too much because the offense can't stay up there.
Just to clarify, can you say that Patriots and dominant team in the same? Can you clarify that again?
No, the Patriots are not a dominant team. The Patriots as a whole suck. The Patriots defense is very strong and is very good, but they are on the field too much and are beaten up and exhausted because the offense is so poor, which is because the offensive line cannot do anything to protect Mac Jones, and he has no one to throw to.
And he also can't throw.
The Patriots defense, just to let you know, they've given up the third most points in the entire AFC.
Yeah, I've explained that. If you're
That's
on the
not
field,
dominant.
if you're on, if you're,
I feel if Zappe was involved more in this, I think I would like some more Zappe
for the majority of the game. You're exhausted, and you can't. By the end of the game, you're letting people score.
Okay, but
Eric,
you can't
question
just
for
be
you.
dominant on the first drive.
Well, hold on. There's two points I want to make to this because I don't want to go all the way down the NFL rabbit hole. We could, but we're gonna chill out on that for a second. But my thought is, isn't it concerning to you that the team is so worn out and exhausted, given that as you've already discussed, the home stadium is a tiny little mini stadium. It's very small. The field is like a micro machine field. It's super tiny. It's tiny small. Should it like by a single leap by a person of average height should get us from one end zone to another? Like we should literally be
It
going.
does seem that way.
Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to get all this. Like there's a lot of things going around in my head right now. I'm trying to get my head around it, and I'm very concerned. And the only thought I have is maybe Zappe will save us. That's all I got.
I think they should bring the Celtics in on offense because they're really tall and they have their steps are longer, so they would be able to get down the field easier. Because they have really long strides because they're like 7 feet tall. So
Well, they choke in the playoffs, though.
I think the Celtics should, come play offense for the Patriots.
Well, maybe the Patriots should have brought in the Bruins because they're good in the regular season and then not good otherwise. And the Patriots could take over in the playoffs and maybe they'd be fine.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate
Bring
it.
it all together.
Bring
it all together.
We're gonna wrap it up.
I was thinking the same thing on the Celtics. I mean, they get to the playoffs, but
yeah, it's important. Listen, you got to have a regular season to get to the playoffs. So it's important. So on that bombshell, and the tiniest little football stadium in the entire league, per Eric, the tiniest little micro machine of a stadium with tiny little fields. So we've got that to look forward to. We'll discuss that more. And then one of the things we discussed before we actually started recording is maybe we'll come back around to the topic. This will be something maybe we can discuss next week, unless something crazy happens. If somebody sets himself on fire, we can discuss a little bit about the value proposition of boxes, which we all know about. But there's, I think, some stories and some things we can talk about related to that. And I'll relay it to some of the stuff that I talked about for the expo. But then we can expand upon it with other box breaks and things like that. Have a little fun with it. Or if something else crazy comes up, then we can discuss it at length at that time. But like I said, hopefully you folks enjoyed the little reverse side of the way we did the podcast this week. Wanted to get that main topic covered because there's a lot of ground. We actually ended up talking about it for a bit and covered a lot of different angles on it. So hopefully you folks get something out of that. But for this episode, go ahead.
I just have one quick thing. If people made it this far, because I don't know if I've ever told you, and Eric probably wouldn't understand. I'm not going to go into this too much. But during the episode, I've had a sale on eBay. And since we talk about cards and, selling cards and all that stuff, would you believe that I have been selling, this is my third one now, stupid little enema. Yes, enemas. Plush stuffed animal enemas for $30 a piece. And people are buying them. There you go. We'll close on that. Just think about that a minute.
Like an enema?
Yeah.
And
but it's a stuffed animal guy. He looks like a superhero.
I'm so happy. I am so happy that there will be an audio version where people are trying to figure out. They're like, what is Eric doing that they're responding to? And it's like, unfortunately, you're going to have to see the YouTube version to understand. And the look on Eric's face during this entire sequence is a great way to finish off. All right, I'm going to move on. First, I want to thank our friends at AMG Collectibles for promoting whatever the hell this is. My apologies. The first part of the show was really good, though. The first part of the show was really good. There was a lot of good stuff in that first part. Otherwise, though, more videos coming up on the YouTube channel, live streams on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Between now and then, Eric will be trying to figure this whole thing out. So hopefully by Friday, he's got it put together. I want to emphasize again, no AMG podcast episode this week, because the folks are a little under the weather from their trip back from the expo. Hopefully they'll feel better. Best of luck to them. And we should be back on a regular schedule after that. And then going forward, we'll also mention off the top, we'll cover different news type topics when they're appropriate. That isn't the main mandate of the channel, but it is something I still enjoy doing from time to time. But we will pick and choose. In a situation like the conversation we had at the beginning and on Friday, I thought it was a worthy discussion because it's somebody who has a platform in the space, for better or worse. And there was plenty to talk about from that perspective. So I want to thank Brandon, Bobbles and Ball Cards on the YouTube channel. You can check it out. He does SGC submissions, and you can check out some previous stuff that he's done on the channel there related to that. And also 540 Flips, if you want to check that out on YouTube, is the reselling channel where he does some things related to that as well. Sanderson to Oris, Eric. There you go. And Eric will be thinking about that at least until the end of the week. Eric at Sanderson Door on Instagram. You can send him hate. Moving beyond that, though, you can also hit the like button, and then Eric gets charged for it so that he doesn't have to spend all his time looking at really tiny football fields somewhere in Massachusetts. So help him out with that if you could. That'd be really awesome. Really small ones, like tiny, tiny. Incredible. incredible that professional athletes actually participate in such a small venue. It's craziness. But maybe that's how they won all the Super Bowls. I got questions. Now I got some additional questions. That seems like a home field advantage having a tinier stadium than everybody else. But anyway, so from Brandon, Bobbles, and Baller Cards, Eric Sanderson, Dora, and myself, thank you all for checking this one out, and we'll be back in the next one.